Children. They're one of life's great joys. In every person's life comes that special time where they must choose whether to have a divorce or have a kid to save the marriage. I'm kidding, of course. This is coming from someone who by all definitions is literally a bastard, so take my advice with a cup full of salt. My point is, there are a lot of parents out there. There are a lot of great parents, like my dad who ran an hour back up a hiking trail when I left my jacket up there, or my mum who stopped a goose from pulling down my pants at the zoo. However, there are a lot of bad parents out there, like my uncle who threw me in the pool when I didn't know how to swim. I mean, he did do me the small mercy of saving my life right after, so I guess we're even. Good parents can help you learn and grow into a well-rounded person, and bad parents, well, bad parents can traumatize you. Today we're talking about Twitter's most recent bizarre drama, the story of John Roderick and the can of beans. Before we get into the video, I'd like to give a massive thank you to today's sponsors, WARMPEOPLE. WARMPEOPLE is an indie company that sells woven blankets, winter blankets, and socks with a range of super cool designs. You may have noticed that I spiced up my setup a little bit, and this amazing tapestry behind me is actually a woven blanket from WARMPEOPLE. That's right, I spent a whole hour of my life hanging a blanket on my wall because, I mean, well, look at it looks amazing. I also got some socks from WARMPEOPLE in the pattern Ocean Dweller. These socks have a high thread count, which basically means they're super soft and comfortable, as well as making you look cool as hell. Also, all the WARMPEOPLE socks come in this amazing can packaging. Oh, thank God, it's 0 calories. The packaging alone has made me want to buy all of the other WARMPEOPLE socks just to collect the cans. Look at the cat one, that is incredible. This is a 2-layer reversible Sherpa blanket with microfiber plush, and oh my golly good lord, is it plush with a capital P. Having slept with this blanket for a few nights now, I can officially say this is the softest, most comfy blanket I have ever owned. I almost felt genuine emotional pain for my previous blanket because it got immediately sidelined for this. I would literally expect to pay like $100 for these, but no, each of these items, including this huge plush Sherpa blanket, are like $38 and under. That is criminally affordable. Whether you want to rug up for the winter or decorate your room/feet, head to warmpeople.co and check out their range of super cool, super aesthetic blankets and socks. You can use my discount code IZZY for 20% off your entire order. Once again, that's code IZZY, I-Z-Z-Y, at checkout for 20% off your whole order. Thank you so much to WARMPEOPLE for sponsoring this video. Like, I'm literally so stoked to have such a cool sponsor because they were just like so chill and down to earth, and the products are amazing, and I'm just like gushing because it's all so good. So genuinely go check them out. They're really cool and their products are obviously amazing. And once again, thank you for sponsoring me. And now, let's get on with the video. John Roderick is the lead singer and guitarist of the indie band Long Winters, as well as a podcaster and general public figure. You know the ones. You can't really put a finger on who they are, but a lot of people seem to know them, and they have a lot of followers, and they have a blue tick, so you're kind of like, okay. He's well known for having written the theme music for the podcast My Brother and Me, run by the delightful McElroy brothers. He seemed generally like a pretty well liked and cool guy, being involved in music, politics, and entertainment with a large number of supporters. So how did this indie rock singer from Seattle become Twitter's most hated person and become known as Bean Dad? It all started, as most things do on Twitter, with a thread. Now I kind of struggled with how to present this since it's a pretty long thread, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna just plainly read out the whole thread so you can hear the whole thing, since I know some people like to just listen to my videos, and then after that I'm going to tear it apart and give my opinion on it. So if you don't want to hear me read out the whole thing, you can skip to this timestamp, otherwise, enjoy the show. So yesterday, my daughter, 9, was hungry and I was doing a jigsaw puzzle, so I said over my shoulder, make some baked beans. She said, how? Like all kids do when they want you to do it, so I said, open a can and put it in the pot. She brought me the can and said, open it how? With a can opener, I said, incredulous. She brought me the can opener and we both stared at it. I realized I never taught her to use it. Most cans now have pull tops. I felt like a dope. What kind of apocalypse father doesn't teach his kid how to use a manual can opener? So I said, how do you think this works? She studied it and applied it to the top of the can sideways. She struggled for a while and with a big dramatic sigh said, will you please just open the can? Apocalypse Dad was overjoyed. A teaching moment just dropped into my lap. I said, the little device is designed to do one thing, open cans. Study the parts, study the can, figure out what the can opener inventor was thinking when they tried to solve this problem. The can opener is also a bottle opener, but I explained that part wasn't relevant. I went back to my jigsaw puzzle. She was next to me grunting and groaning, trying to get the thing. I should say that spatial orientation, process visualization, and order of operations are not things she intuits. I knew this would be a challenge. but it was a rainy weekend. Eventually, she collapsed in a frustrated heap. I said, "Explain the parts." She said, "This little wheel is meant to cut. These gears turn the wheel when you spin the handle. This other wheel looks like a gear but isn't." She couldn't figure out the clamping step, a key element. I said, "The tool is made to be pleasing, but it doesn't have any superfluous qualities. Everything that moves does so for a reason." She said, "I hate you." I'm sure she believes that she does. I said, "You understand everything except how the tool addresses the can." She sighed. At this point she said, "I don't want baked beans," and marched off. Apocalypse Dad went into full the road mode. "Sweetheart, neither of us will eat another bite today until we get into this can of beans." She screamed, "Ah," like Lucy Van Pelt. She read a book for a while. Soon she was back at the can. The top was all dented now, the lip of the can practically serrated from failed attempts. We studied the tool some more. She really wanted it to be oriented up or down across the top of the can. The sideways orientation is very counterintuitive. She was fixated on orienting the tool in a few configurations and couldn't imagine other possibilities. I compared the can opener to other tools. By now we were working on anger management and perseverance too. She suggested we open the can with a hammer. There were tears. I told her stories of some of the great cans I'd opened over the years. She rolled her eyes. We talked about industrial design and what a funny little device the opener is. I showed how I open cans with a buck knife. I rhapsodized about cold SpaghettiOs straight from the can. Eventually she had it all figured out. She had the placement of the tool, she could turn the handle and the can would spin. We were down on the floor by this point, but the ka-chunk of puncture in the lid still eluded us. We'd been at it for 6 hours on and off. We were hungry. I'd been tempted many times along the way to guide her hand. I wanted her to experience the magnificence of the can opener so much I couldn't stand the suspense. Neither of us likes baked beans that much, the cupboards are bare, so it seemed like a paltry reward for this work. I'd forgotten how finicky the tool really is, particularly when it comes to the puncture. She had it all lined up, but the cutting wheel is a little wobbly by design and you have to really get on top of it to clamp it down. You know the feeling? You can misfire the damn thing. Finally, she squeezed down on it, and although it was a misfire, a light went off in her head. Many times throughout the day she'd yelled at me, "My brain is fuzzy, I can't think of anything else to try." And I'd say, "When your brain doesn't work, trust your hands." She felt the tool click over the lip of the can. I saw it in her hands. By this point she'd developed a little ritual of addressing the tool to the can, starting with it on a vertical axis and rotating it to the horizontal while clamping down in a single motion. A choreography. She looked at me expectantly, excitedly. After 6 hours of trying, you don't want to express too much hope. Was this another blind alley? The can had been through hell, label ripped off, dented, sharpened and burred, a veteran of 1,000 psychic wars. She knew though. Jesus Christ, I don't know if I can read all of this in one sentence. She set up carefully and brought the swing away to bear on the can of S&W baked beans with the meticulousness of Roger Moore extracting a detonator from an ICBM in The Spy Who Loved Me. Jesus Christ. A soft pop resounded in the room, so different from all the other sounds we'd made. She didn't look up. She knew the action. A little baked bean sauce appeared. She savored each twist until the lid, as I hoped it would, rewarded her by standing perfectly at attention, saluting her effort and ingenuity. She was elated and carried it to the kitchen in both hands. She knew that this was a commonplace task and a common tool, but also that this was serious business. She knows her dad and the stock I put in these things. A more mechanically inclined kid might have figured it out in minutes. She factored the scale, but was rightfully proud. I'm proud of her too. I know I'm infuriating. I know this is parenting theater in some ways. I suffer from a lack of perseverance myself, and like all parents throughout history, I'm trying to correct my own mistakes in the way that I educate my child. She sees through this. The swing away can opener is a little voodoo doll for us now. It will reappear as an allegory many more times in her life, you can be sure. She knows this too. But this is an allegory of triumph. I wish I had more of those for myself. I wish I had more stories like this. The problem is now she wants to open every fucking can in the house. Now, just to clarify before I go into the response and backlash to this thread as well as my take on it, I don't think John Roderick is a bad father. I think that people calling him an abuser or saying that he shouldn't have kids are going way too far, because you can't really judge a person or their worth as a parent based on one thread that might be over exaggerated. However, I do think it's worth examining because of the situation and because of the absolutely enormous amount of outrage. I mean, if father starves child to teach them how to open a can of beans and becomes the most viral drama in recent memory doesn't belong in the Internet Hall of Fame, I don't know what does. Look, I'm not a parent in case that wasn't clear, but you know what they say. You don't have to be a pilot to see a plane crash. I mean, come on, this is just brutal. If my parents wanted to teach me something when I was a kid, they might be like, how do you think it works? Or how about you have a go? After I'd tried and failed a few times, they'd come over and show me how to do it, and then I'd try to replicate that. I mean, maybe it would take a few tries and be frustrating at times, but eventually I learned how to tie my shoes last week. In all seriousness, this really isn't the epic dad moment this dude thinks it is. Let's run through everything wrong with this thread in a nice bullet point list, because writing scripts is hard. Number 1, this thread already starts off like an absolute train wreck. I know what he means by that tone that kids have when they're indirectly asking you to do something for them because they can't be bothered, but he acts like she's this lazy heathen for not knowing how to do something that he never taught her how to do. She's 9, did it ever occur to you that she expects you to do the work for her because sourcing and cooking meals is your job as a parent, not hers? If you want to introduce her to cooking, make it a fun learning experience that you do together. Don't leave your 9-year-old daughter unsupervised dealing with sharp cans and stoves for the first time in her life with zero help or guidance. Number 2, okay, I get it. It's a teaching moment, those are important in parenting. But maybe don't make giving your child food a teaching moment. Your kid doesn't know how to skip rope, fine, let them figure it out themselves and reap the reward of now being able to play helicopter, but don't make food, a basic necessity, a reward. Number 3, the tone. Just from the way he talks, you can tell he's an indie musician from Seattle. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, but the tone from this thread is so smug and self-congratulating, and he writes in this overblown style that makes it seem like he's writing a New Yorker opinion piece or something. Number 4, this whole speech. Study the parts. Study the can, figure out what the can opener inventor was thinking when they tried to solve this problem. Ah yes, father, let me, a 9-year-old, astral project into the mind of the great William Lyman to decipher the machinations of this strange and curious machine. Number 5. The tool is made to be pleasing but doesn't have any superfluous qualities. Everything that moves does so for a reason. Who talks to a 9-year-old like this? I guess the argument is that she's gonna grow up to be some big brain genius that watches Rick and Morty, but like, my parents never talked to me like that and I still brain function good. Number 6, she says she hates her dad and decides she doesn't want to go through the mental torment of being near this man any longer. Sweetheart, neither of us will eat another bite today until we get into this can of beans. The fact that he says he will not feed his child all day unless she completes this inane task that he refuses to properly teach her, that's genuinely terrible. When you're 9 years old, you're fully reliant on your parents to love and take care of you, and you shouldn't have to be worried that that will vanish when your dad decides to force you to complete his weird mind game so he can flex how intelligent he is. Number 7. He spends so much of this thread discussing in weirdly vivid detail all the ways she failed at opening the can and how she was fixated on certain solutions, like he's a field researcher documenting how monkeys interact with tools. A more mechanically inclined kid might have figured it out in seconds. Hey Twitter, get this. My stupid idiot daughter took 6 hours to open a can. Maybe it's not her fault for not being mechanically inclined when you never taught her anything about mechanics. She's not gonna just stand next to a car and absorb mechanics knowledge through osmosis. She's not an idiot or some sort of spectacle to be laughed at with your Twitter friends. There's such a lack of empathy here, especially in the parts where he says his daughter was crying and repeatedly saying that her brain was fuzzy and she couldn't think. Number 8. The can opener will appear as an allegory many more times in her life, you can be sure. She knows this too. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be a cute little memory she'll want to return to. Honey, remember that time I starved you for a whole day and then laughed at how dumb you were on Twitter? Haha, yes. Fond memories. Number 9. But this is an allegory of triumph. I wish I had more of those myself. I wish I had more stories like this. Once again, I feel really rude and mean saying it, and I don't mean to be, but like, It's a can of beans. She opened a can of beans. She didn't climb Mount Kilimanjaro. She didn't get an Emmy nomination for Best Actor. You forced her to spend 6 hours opening a can of beans. I'm sick of him waxing poetic about this wonderful triumph and the spirit of perseverance when this is one of the least triumphant or inspirational things I've ever heard. And number 10, his whole teaching method is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You don't teach someone how to ride a bike by tossing a bike at them and telling them to study how the cogs and chains move and envision what the inventor was trying to create. You can study all the machinations you want, but you're not going to have a solid idea of what to do with the thing until someone shows you in a practical setting how it's used. You teach them by demonstrating how to ride it yourself, letting them try and fail, helping them understand where they went wrong and how to learn from those failures, and repeating until they've learned the basics of that skill. What John did was drop the can opener into her lap and tell her to figure it out herself with incredibly obtuse and useless advice that no normal person, let alone a 9-year-old, would find helpful or constructive in any way. You don't need to spend 6 hours forcing someone to learn the machinations of a can opener when you can spend 5 seconds just teaching them how to use it, and you'll find the cost of therapy will be a lot lower. Anyway, let's move on to how Bean Dad became one of the most viral things in recent memory and the fallout from the event. Twitter's wrath was swift and merciless. Replies flooded in, calling John everything from an abuser to a misogynist to a terrible parent. And like I said earlier, I personally don't feel like I can make a call on any of these things considering I only have the context of this incident to go off, but many others had no qualms telling John what they thought about him. Many people who suffered from childhood abuse recalled similar incidents in their own childhoods which actually caused them anxiety, self-hatred, and trust issues which they carried into adult life. Around this time, some of John's old tweets were dug up mainly from around 2013, but some don't have timestamps. These tweets contain homophobic, racist, transphobic, and anti-Semitic slurs, and this really was the final nail in the coffin. Like, he wasn't trying to make bad taste jokes or anything, he was straight up spouting anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and making targeted racial comments towards people. Many Twitter users also made fun of his book, which is literally a book of his own tweets. I mean, I guess now that his account is deleted, we'll never know what he thinks about the film conventions and Seattle weather. Oh no. Even his music got criticized in the firestorm, with Anthony Fantano himself calling John's work generic trash acoustic indie rock that isn't worth a damn. I'm taking that's gonna be a 0. My brother and me made a public statement announcing that they're cutting ties with John and will not be using his music anymore, and his now deleted account is silent. He recently came back with an apology, noting that his wife had been present the whole time and that they had had a big breakfast and were snacking throughout the ordeal. He essentially explained that anyone who knows him would know that he was simply over-dramatizing things for effect. He also apologized for using slurs and said that he was trying to use them in a mocking, subversive way, which sure buddy. Ultimately, if he is to be believed in this situation, it was simply a case of miscommunication. His thread did contain content that resembled abusive behaviors, and he didn't account for the fact that many people grew up in abusive homes and therefore would interpret this thread in a much darker way. Aside from the controversy of whether it was or was not genuinely harmful to the child, I think that we can all still agree that it's one of the most hilariously ridiculous ways of teaching ever recorded. The words "study the can" are etched into my brain. The story of Bean Dad is a bizarre one. The way that Bean Dad talked about his child in a condescending way and wrote about withholding food were fairly disturbing, and it's understandable that people who grew up in abusive conditions would interpret this thread as a display of abusive behavior. Like, let's be honest, he doesn't paint himself in a great light in this thread. With the added context of this apology, it paints him as less of a horrible abuser and more of a bumbling fool. But like the pretentious indie version of that. I believe that for the most part it was a misunderstanding, but like, I kinda stick to my original points. It was a terrible way of teaching something, and withholding food no matter the circumstances is never a good idea. The story of Bean Dad is an interesting case of misunderstanding and viral outrage, as well as a cautionary tale that reminds us to think before we publish a book of our own tweets. Post about our lives. As one person pointed out, Bean Dad deleted his account in less time than it took his daughter to open that can of beans, and it seemed like the internet gave him a teaching moment that he couldn't handle. Thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much to Warm People for sponsoring me, genuinely like the coolest sponsors, coolest products. Please go support them and show them some love. And thank you so much for supporting me or even just watching this video. I really appreciate it, thank you so much, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye!